Dr. Brown. So this is my response to historical thinking part 3 discussion questions. And let's get started. Okay, so what is historical thinking? I really loved this quote from James Baldwin from week 8, the first week of historical thinking. Quote, "The great force of history comes from the fact that we carry it within us, are consciously controlled by it in many ways, and history is literally present in all that we do." I think that is one of the aspects of historical, like what makes historical thinking so important, and that is that it affects us even today. So we need to engage with historical thinking in order to gain a deep understanding of what has made ourselves today and our culture today, us as individuals, our families, and everything. Being able to think about it in a deeply critical, analytical, and nuanced way is what makes historical thinking so important. So how would I bring it to my classroom? Well, one, I really enjoyed all of the activities that we did over the course of these weeks with historical thinking, and primary source engagement is I think the most important aspect. And then being able to follow it up with critical thinking questions, that like we've been doing this past week. So a primary source, according to Dr. Vickery, is an original record created during its time period that does not contain any outside interpretation. So I really like that definition because it makes it very apparent what is a primary source and what is a secondary source. So a secondary source happens after the fact, right? Somebody who didn't experience it or is synthesizing information from other people and compiling it in a way, or is their interpretation of an event. So, and whereas a primary source is actual material from the event or from people who lived the event. And those primary sources is what brings history to life. So I love primary sources. No one buys a textbook after they graduate, okay? Primary sources are where it's at. People will read, nonfiction about history and historical people, right? But they will not ever buy a textbook. Why? Because one is interesting and the other is not. So that is what we need to do to bring to our kids, is the magic of history, bringing it to life and seeing why is it relevant to you. One thing I really enjoyed about learning about Gordon Parks's photography on segregation was when he did American Gothic and the play on the original from 1930 from Grant Wood, the famous painting. And during an interview with Gordon Parks, he was asked, "How do you photograph discrimination? You can't just turn a camera on a guy and say, 'This is a bigot,' because bigots have a way of looking like anybody else. You can't quite tell the difference." I really loved this quote because although, of course, there are moments that are photographed where you get people behaving in a bigoted way documented, I really love that it's like you can't tell who they are unless you break it down and see where the motivations were. And it kind of reminded me, and it's something that I could bring to the present in a classroom setting, is it reminds me a lot of the Karens caught on camera, as it were. So like Barbecue Becky Permit Patty, Central Park Karen, these are all people who their racism was on display and documented in a way that maybe wasn't as available to Gordon Parks when everybody was segregated. So where you get that interaction, you get to document that interaction between white people and Black people in a way that it is so apparent and undeniable, the discrimination and bigotry. So I really love that that quote, and that's why he created that American Gothic work in 1942. Okay, and let's get back to the questions. So I would like to use those kinds of quotes and events and perspectives to bring into the present as well in my classroom. Okay, and next question. What is a popular event in U.S. history that could use some additional historical thinking context? So what came to mind for me was not so much an event, but in effect, well, I guess sort of an event, like the Trail of Tears and the aftermath of that event. So what came to mind specifically, and especially I think is a great visual breakdown, is the boarding schools for Indians, Native Americans, Indigenous people, and what they were doing, why they were there, what the motivations were, what the experiences were of the children who were forced into that. And because I think that is so relatable to kids, it really could emphasize their empathy, their moral judgment part of historical thinking. And also there's a lot of visual work that is relevant today. So for example, the sculptures of Allan Hauser, who I think has a sculpture in every US Capitol, or like 48 of them. So including the White House now. Biden has it in the Oval Office. He's got an Allan Hauser sculpture, and I think that being able to analyze his artwork and also talk about his experiences, I'm sure that there are lots of primary resources about that could not only teach about historical thinking, but also about hidden history, hard history, and really delving into an underrepresented population. So that's my synthesis of historical thinking for week 10. I hope that you enjoyed and have a wonderful day. Bye.